My name is Clara Jennings, and I was 34 years old when the wind began to change everything. I lived in a small town in Oklahoma, in a wooden house that my husband, Samuel, built with his own hands before we were married. We had 2 children, Lily, who was 12, and Tom, who had just turned 9. Our town was quiet, made of small houses, a church, and one road that went all the way to the highway. It was the kind of place where people knew each other by name and waved from their porches every morning. But that was before the land stopped giving and the sky turned dry. It started slowly. The first summer, the ground cracked under our feet. The wheat turned yellow too early, and the cows grew thinner. Samuel said it would pass, that the rain always returned after hard years. But then another season came, and nothing changed. We waited for the clouds, but all we got was dust. It blew into our house, covered the tables, and made our throats burn at night. People began to leave one by one. You could see their wagons or trucks loaded with furniture, pots, and blankets. They went west, toward California, they said, because there was work and green land waiting for them there. Samuel did not want to go. He said a man must stand on his own soil. He said leaving was the same as giving up. I wanted to believe him, but each week it grew harder. The bank men came in their clean shirts and shiny cars. They said our land belonged to them now. Samuel argued that the land was ours, that we had paid for it with years of sweat, but they did not listen. They left papers with stamps and signatures that meant nothing to us but everything to them. When the men drove away, Samuel sat on the porch, quiet, with his head in his hands. That night, I heard him crying for the first time in our marriage. We tried to stay. We covered the windows with cloth and wet towels to keep out the dust. I made soup from potatoes and old beans, and we ate it slowly so it would last. Lily asked when the rain would come back, and I told her soon. But I could not even remember the smell of rain anymore. Tom had a cough that never stopped. The doctor in town had already gone west with his own family, so we had no one to help us. The only medicine I had was boiled herbs and a wet cloth for his head. Every night, I prayed for a miracle. Every morning, the wind answered with more dust. In February, a letter came from my sister Martha, who lived in California. She had gone there with her husband 2 years earlier. Her letter said there were farms hiring people for the orange harvest, and that there were small cabins where workers could stay. She wrote, "Come if you can, Clara. There's work for Samuel, and the children will be safe here. Don't let pride keep you there." I read her letter again and again. I could almost feel her voice pushing me forward. That night, when Samuel came in from outside, his face was gray from the wind, and I told him about Martha's letter. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Pack what we can carry." The next morning, we began to prepare. We sold what little we could to a neighbor who still had some money left. I packed our clothes, blankets, and 2 pans. I took my mother's photograph from the wall and wrapped it in a towel. Samuel fixed up the truck that hadn't been used in months. It was old, and the tires were thin, but it was our only hope. We filled 2 cans with water and another with fuel. I cooked the last potatoes and saved some bread for the road. When the sun rose the next day, we locked the door behind us. There was nothing left to come back to. We drove west, following the same road that others had taken before us. The land looked empty. Houses stood like bones, windows broken, roofs fallen. Sometimes we saw a family walking, carrying bags, children in their arms. When we stopped for rest, we talked to them. Most were from Kansas or Texas. They all said the same thing, that they had lost everything. At night, we slept inside the truck or beside it, under a blanket if the air was cold. The children were quiet most of the time. They watched the road and asked how far California was. I told them not far now, but the truth was I did not know. One evening, we stopped near a small gas station. There was another family parked there, an old man, his wife, and their grown son. They had a broken tire, and Samuel helped them fix it. The woman shared some coffee with me, and we talked while the men worked. Her name was Edna, and she told me they had been on the road for 3 weeks. She said California was not what everyone thought it was. Too many people, she said. Too many hands for not enough work. I felt something heavy in my chest, but I didn't tell Samuel. I needed to believe there was hope ahead, even if it was small. The next few days were long and hard. The road climbed through dry hills and flat plains. The sun was cruel, and our water ran low. Once, the truck stopped in the middle of the road, and Samuel spent hours trying to fix it. I walked with the children to a nearby house, but it was empty. There was a well, but it was dry. When I came back, Samuel was still under the truck, his hands covered in oil. "We'll get it running," he said. I sat beside him and held his arm. I could feel the fear under his skin, the same fear I tried to hide from the children. That night, we reached a camp near a small river. There were many families there, all traveling west. Some had tents, some slept in their cars. The air smelled of smoke and hunger. People shared what they had, a little bread, a little hope. I met a woman named Nora who had a baby no older than a month. She said her husband had gone to find work and hadn't come back yet. Her voice shook when she spoke, but her eyes were strong. She told me, "We women have to keep going, even when the men can't." I looked at her baby and thought about my own children asleep in the truck. In the morning, we crossed the border into California. I had imagined green fields and wide rivers, but the land was brown and crowded with people. We passed signs that said, "No jobs here," and "Keep out." I saw families standing on the side of the road, holding signs that said, "We'll work for food." The dream I had carried in my heart began to tremble. Still, I told the children to look ahead, to keep believing. When we reached the town Martha had written about, we found her near a line of small wooden cabins. She cried when she saw us. The cabins were small and crowded, but it felt like safety. She gave us water and bread, and we sat together until the sky turned dark. That night, for the first time in months, I slept without fear of the wind. But deep inside, I knew the journey wasn't over. The road had ended, yes, but our struggle had only changed its shape. As I watched my children sleep, I thought about the land we had left behind. I could still see the fields, dry and broken, and I wondered if they would ever live again. I thought of the neighbors who stayed and the ones we met along the way. Some faces I would never see again. Some would make it, others would not. The road west had taken pieces of everyone, but it had also given us something new, the will to survive when there was nothing left to hold on to. I did not know what tomorrow would bring, but I had stopped waiting for miracles. The world had become hard, but my heart had learned how to keep beating through the dust. We were tired, but we were alive. And that, I told myself, was enough for now. Before I continue with the story, please like, subscribe, share, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now, let's continue. The first week in California passed in a blur of heat, hunger, and new faces. Martha's cabin was smaller than I had imagined, just one room with a stove in the corner and 2 small beds. Her husband, Peter, worked in the orange fields outside the town. He came home late each night, his hands red and raw from the fruit. There was hardly enough money for their own children, but still they shared what little they had with us. I tried to help by washing, cooking, and looking after the younger ones while Samuel searched for work. He went out every morning before the sun rose, walking down the long road that led to the fields. Some days he came back with a small job, some days with nothing. The farms were full of men waiting to be chosen, standing with hats in their hands. The owners drove by in their trucks, looking at the workers as if they were animals in a market. They picked the strongest and left the rest. The pay was low, the hours long, and the fields endless. Still, Samuel said it was better than sitting with empty hands. Lily helped me with the chores. She had always been quiet, but here she grew even more silent. She missed our home, her friends, and the old life we had lost. Sometimes I caught her looking out the window at the hills, her eyes far away. Tom, on the other hand, made friends easily with the other children in the camp. They ran through the dusty paths between the cabins, laughing, playing with sticks, pretending to be cowboys. Their laughter gave me a small sense of peace, even when everything else felt uncertain. Food was a daily worry. There were small shops in town, but prices were high. Martha and I learned to stretch everything we had. We made bread from cornmeal and soup from whatever vegetables the men could bring home. Sometimes we traded things with other women. One had extra flour, another had onions. We shared our worries too. At night, when the air cooled and the children slept, we sat outside together, talking quietly. Some women had lost their husbands on the road. Others were waiting for letters that never came. But we all had the same look in our eyes, tired but holding on. One morning, a man came to the camp with a sign that said there was work in the cotton fields down near Bakersfield. Many families left that same day, their trucks full again, heading south. Samuel wanted to go too. Martha tried to stop him, saying there was no guarantee of pay, but he said we could not stay and wait forever. We had to move, he said, if we wanted to live. I packed what little we had again: clothes, blankets, a small bag of food, and said goodbye to Martha. She cried as we left, and I promised to write when we found a place to stay. The road to Bakersfield was long and full of travelers. We drove slowly because the truck was old and the tires were worn. Sometimes we saw people by the roadside with broken engines, waiting for someone to stop. We helped when we could, but we also knew our own luck was thin. One evening, the truck began to shake. Samuel stopped to check the engine, but there was smoke coming from under the hood. He said we needed water to cool it, but the can was almost empty. We waited by the road for hours until another family stopped and shared a little with us. They were kind people from Arkansas, traveling with 3 children. We followed them for a few days after that, moving together like 2 small caravans in the desert. When we reached the cotton camp, there were hundreds of tents and small shacks. The land was wide and white with fields that looked endless. The owners gave each family a small area to live in, no bigger than a kitchen. We built a fire pit outside and cooked our food over it. The air smelled of smoke and sweat. Every morning before sunrise, the men and older children went to the fields to pick cotton. The women stayed behind to cook, wash clothes, and care for the younger ones. The pay was by the pound, and no one ever earned enough. Some nights, Samuel came back so tired he could hardly speak. His hands were cut from the dry cotton plants, and his shirt was soaked with dust and sweat. Still, for a while, we had food again. The children ate more, and their faces looked brighter. I found small jobs too, washing clothes for other families. The money was little, but it made me feel useful. Yet the camp was not safe. There were fights when people argued about water or space. Sometimes strangers came at night, looking for trouble or food. We learned to keep quiet and stay close to our fire. I slept lightly, always listening for footsteps. As the days passed, I began to see how hard life was for everyone here. Men worked like machines, and women carried the rest on their backs. The owners treated us as if we were invisible. They shouted orders and counted the sacks of cotton, but never looked at our faces. When someone was too sick or weak to work, they were replaced without a word. There was no help, no doctor, no mercy. I realized then that we had traded one kind of suffering for another. One evening, while I was washing clothes by the river, I met a woman named Ruth. She was older than me, maybe 50, with strong arms and tired eyes. She told me she had been in California for 3 years, moving from farm to farm. She said she had stopped believing in promises. "The land here looks rich," she said, "but it feeds only those who already have plenty." Her words stayed with me all night. I wanted to argue, to say there must be hope somewhere, but deep inside I knew she was right. That winter was cold and wet. The river rose and the ground turned to mud. The cabins flooded and some tents were washed away. Children caught fevers and old people grew weak. Samuel got sick too, coughing and burning with fever. There was no doctor, so I used wet cloths and prayed he would recover. I had to work alone in the fields for a few days, leaving the children with Ruth. My hands bled from the cold, and my back hurt from bending. Each evening, I came home and sat by Samuel's side, hoping his eyes would open again. After a week, he began to breathe easier. I thanked God quietly, but I also knew the sickness had changed him. He spoke less and stared more. I think he felt ashamed that I had worked while he lay in bed. But I did not care about pride anymore. Pride did not fill our stomachs or keep the children warm. In February, the owners cut the pay again. There were too many workers, they said. Families started leaving once more, searching for better farms. The air in the camp grew tense. People whispered about protests, about standing together. Some men talked about marching to the town office to demand fair wages. Samuel listened but said nothing. One night, a group went out to speak to the farm manager. The next day, 2 of them did not return. No one spoke about it again. I began to keep a small notebook where I wrote everything I saw: the faces, the hunger, the wind that never stopped. I did not know why I wrote, but it helped me stay calm. Sometimes I read my notes aloud to Lily, and she said my words made her feel less afraid. I told her that stories were a way to remember who we were, even when the world wanted to forget us. By spring, the cotton fields were dry again. The owners said there would be no more work until next season. We had no money left, and the food was almost gone. One morning, Ruth came to our cabin and said there was talk of new jobs in the north, near a place with orchards and farms. She was leaving the next day. I did not want to start the road again, but Samuel said we had no choice. I packed once more, slower this time, tired of the same routine: hope, travel, disappointment. Before leaving, I went down to the river one last time. The water was still muddy, but it caught the light of the sun. I watched it move, carrying small leaves and pieces of wood. I thought about how we were like that water, always moving, never resting. Maybe one day we would find a place to stay, or maybe we would keep drifting until the end. Either way, I knew we had to go. Because stopping meant giving up, and giving up was the one thing I could never teach my children to do. We left the cotton camp at sunrise. The air was cool, and the sky was soft pink. I sat beside Samuel in the truck, holding Lily and Tom close. We had so little left: 1 blanket, 2 bags of clothes, and a box of bread and apples. The engine made a rough sound as we drove north, following the long road through the valley. I did not know where it would end, only that it led to another promise, another place where we might begin again. The road passed through towns that looked tired and broken. We saw other families walking along the side, their shoes covered in dust, their faces thin and pale. Sometimes, when the truck slowed, people waved to us and asked if we had work. I wished I could tell them yes, that things were better somewhere ahead. But I had no truth to give, only the same hope that kept us moving. After 3 days, we reached a large farm near a town called Modesto. The fields were full of fruit trees, green and heavy with blossoms. The air smelled sweet, and for the first time in months, I felt the sun without fear. There were hundreds of people in the camp outside the farm waiting for jobs. The owners took names and told us to wait. Samuel stood in line for hours while I found a place to sit under a tree with the children. The ground was soft, and there was a small stream nearby. It reminded me of the river back home before the dust took it away. In the evening, Samuel returned with a small smile. He had work for the next day picking peaches. Pay was not much, but it was enough to buy food. I cooked our last bread that night and listened to the quiet sounds of the camp, soft voices, crying babies, the wind moving through the trees. It was a different kind of silence, not the heavy one from back home. This one felt alive. The next morning, Samuel went to the fields. I helped in the kitchen tent, washing pots and carrying water for the cooks. It was hard work, but my hands were strong now. I met women from many places, Texas, Kansas, Arkansas, all with stories like mine. We shared our pain and our strength in small smiles, in the way we helped each other without words. At night, I washed Samuel's clothes and listened to the children's laughter. For the first time, their laughter sounded free. Days turned into weeks. The farm was busy from dawn until dark. The pay was small but steady, and there was food every day. Sometimes after dinner, the workers sang together. Old songs from home, soft and slow. The music floated through the air like a promise. I began to believe that maybe we had reached a place where we could stay. But nothing lasted long for people like us. One afternoon, a group of men came from town. They said the pay would be cut again because the fruit season was ending. The workers were angry. Some wanted to leave, but there was nowhere else to go. Others talked about standing together, refusing to work until the pay was fair. Samuel listened quietly that night as we sat by the fire. I could see the struggle in his face between fear and pride. Finally, he said we should stay calm, at least until we earned enough for the next week. The next morning, some men refused to go to the fields. The guards came soon after, shouting and waving sticks. I held Tom and Lily close while Samuel stood in front of us. There was pushing, shouting, and fear. The men who refused to work were forced to leave the camp. One of them, a boy no older than 20, was hit by a guard and fell to the ground. His mother screamed. I wanted to run to her, but Samuel pulled me back. "We can't help now," he whispered. I hated those words, but I knew he was right. That night, the camp was quiet again. People spoke in low voices, as if afraid of the dark itself. The next few days were tense. Everyone worked without talking. Even the children played quietly. I saw the sadness in Samuel's eyes. He had once been proud, strong, sure of what was right and wrong. Now he looked like a man carrying too much. When he came home one night, his shoulders were shaking. He said nothing, but I could see tears in his eyes. I did not ask questions. I just put my arms around him and let him breathe. One evening, a storm came suddenly. The wind bent the trees, and rain fell hard for the first time in months. The tent shook, and the fires went out. The ground turned to mud, and water ran through the camp. We tried to keep the blankets dry, but everything was soaked. Lily coughed all night, her small body trembling. I held her close, whispering to keep her calm. In the morning, the storm was gone, but the camp was a mess. The river had risen, and some people had lost their things. We had no dry clothes left. A few days later, Samuel said he had heard about a new place further north where there was steady work on a dairy farm. He wanted to go alone first, to see if it was true. I didn't want him to leave, but I knew he needed to. He promised he would come back for us in a week. He kissed Lily and Tom and walked away down the road, carrying his small bag. I watched until he disappeared behind the trees. The week passed slowly. Each evening, I waited by the road, looking for his figure in the distance. On the 7th day, he didn't come. On the 8th, I still waited. The children asked where he was, and I said he must have found work and would send for us soon. But inside, my heart grew heavy. By the 10th day, I knew something was wrong. A man came to the camp that afternoon. He said there had been an accident on the road. A truck had overturned in the rain. One of the men who died carried a small bag and a piece of paper with a family name on it. Jennings. My breath caught. The world went silent. I don't remember what I said next or how I moved. I just remember the sound of the wind in my ears and the feeling that everything had turned to dust again. That night, I sat alone outside our tent. The sky was clear, full of stars. I thought of Samuel's hands, rough and warm, of the way he smiled when the children laughed. I thought of the long road we had taken together from the dry fields of Oklahoma to this strange place. It felt unfair that he had come so far only to be taken by chance. But then I looked at Lily and Tom sleeping beside me, their faces soft and peaceful, and I realized that his strength was still with us. It lived in them, and in me too. After Samuel's death, I could have gone back to Martha, but I didn't. I knew she already had too many mouths to feed. I stayed in the camp and kept working. The men in charge didn't care who picked the fruit, only that it got done. I learned to drive the truck myself and carried boxes from the fields. The other women helped me when they could. Some days were better, some worse, but I kept going because I had to. By autumn, the orchards were full again. The trees glowed with color, and the air smelled sweet. Lily and Tom went to a small school nearby that had been opened for the workers' children. They learned to read and write, and every day they brought me stories about what they learned. Their teachers said they were bright and curious. Hearing that gave me strength. Maybe their future could be different from ours. Sometimes, when the sun went down and the air turned cool, I sat by the river near the camp. I watched the water move slowly under the trees and thought about everything we had lost and everything we still had. The world was unfair, but it was also alive. There were still small moments of kindness, a shared loaf of bread, a warm word, a song at night. Those things kept us human. I began writing in my notebook again. I wrote about the dust, the road, the people we met, and the faces I would never see again. I wrote about Samuel and the strength he left behind. One day, I told myself, I would show my children those pages so they would know where they came from. Not to make them sad, but to remind them that they were born from courage and from love that never gave up. When I finished writing one night, I closed the notebook and looked at the stars. The wind was soft, and I could almost hear Samuel's voice in it, gentle and calm. The journey had taken everything from us, but it had also given us something no one could take the will to keep walking, even when the road disappeared. I did not know what tomorrow would bring, but I was no longer afraid of it, because I had learned that hope was not a place you reached. It was something you carried inside you, like a small flame that survived every storm. And as long as that flame burned, even faintly, we were never truly lost. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.